So we here are going to be talking about how to start a digital dialogue with students and your own children. And my name, first off, is Jennifer McChesney-Puckett. I come from some kind of a different background than many of you here. I actually work on the flip side of things, where for many years I worked as a community manager and digital safety expert for companies building these apps and games and products for children. And my role in particular was to train individuals like moderators to review all the content, and should they find anything dangerous or nefarious, to report it up to local authorities and work with the kids and the parents themselves to help keep those kids safe online. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to each of my panelists here and give them each a minute to just introduce themselves and why they're here on this panel.
Okay. My name is Jason Ikovitz. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice close to Beverly Hills. And I'm also the elementary school counselor at Pilgrim School, which is a small private school in Koreatown.
Please?
My name is Mercedes Mudio, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and parent coach. My business is the parenting skill, and with that I work with parents to really empower them to feel more confident in the work that they're doing with their children, as well as to, my big picture thing is to end parent shaming. So that's something that I really am passionate about, and I do that by helping parents feel empowered.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dolly Clock. I'm a family medicine physician, and I'm a mom of a 13-year-old and almost 10-year-old. I have a business called Adolescence, through which I do some private consultation and lots of parent education around the topics of how to talk to kids about changing bodies, puberty, sex, substance use, stuff like that. And so I'm thrilled to be here today because this digital conversation is very closely intertwined with these other conversations.
Hi, I'm Dr. Casey Weinstein. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice where I work with kids and teens and do a lot of parenting. Prior to this year, I was the middle school counselor for Milken Community Schools. And now I work with them to consult for mental health and run all of their parenting groups. So this is a topic that comes up probably every group, no matter what it is that we're talking about. So I'm really happy to be here today. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Howard Barker, and I'm the community liaison for Clear Recovery Center. Like a couple of the other panelists, I also do a lot of work with parents, educating substance abuse, anxiety, depression with teens, and the digital landscape is all intertwined with all of those things. And that's a big topic that we see with a lot of parents surrounding all the other issues that we work with kids on. So happy to be a part of this.
I want to thank all of you for being here so late in the afternoon during this hour to learn from all these esteemed colleagues and experts. So I just have a few questions here, and then of course we're going to open it up to you guys. So let's make this more about a conversation. So from each of you, from my impression, actually, from where I'm standing and what the work that I've done, the impression I get about mostly therapists, counselors, etc., is that your role usually comes at the end or the crux of the situation. Whereas where I'm coming from, when I start working with online space, we see the conversations happening, we see those escalations starting to happen, and then we report things either to local authorities or to a company themselves, and then they end up going to you guys. What I'd like to know is, would you agree, first off, that that's kind of the way things are happening, is you're getting things sort of at the crux of the situation? And if so, is there anything that you would ask of schools or parents or teachers to maybe see if there's something they can do to, I don't know, prevent having to come to you guys at that stage? Or anything you'd like to see parents and schools do to I don't know, prevent some of that, I guess, happening in the future? Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, well, I think that we definitely, we kind of do end up with families and kids that are on more close to the end of the scale, right, where there's problems already presenting themselves, where online behavior has already become dangerous to a certain degree. And I think this is a question that we also get asked a lot by parents, right? What can I do? I've got a 17-year-old kid, what can I do to fix everything and prevent any more problems from coming? And the hard answer that I often see is that it's got to be implemented earlier on, right? So once you have a 17-year-old that's already engaging in, dangerous online behavior, a lot of validation seeking going on, a lot of this other stuff that can lead to some of these problems, you're already in a situation where there's 17 years of behavior and family dynamic and the stuff that's been learned at that point, right? And so what we talk to parents a lot about is really integrating some of these healthier skills earlier on. Now that's not something that can't be utilized once someone is a little bit older already, they definitely can, but kind of approaching this as a family system starting from the beginning, right? And so not waiting until there's a fire that you have to put out, but creating the groundwork so that fires can't start in the first place.
Yeah.
I also agree with that. When I'm in a parent meeting with the principal and we're kind of talking about what's happening, maybe it's in the classroom or on the schoolyard, I really stress to the parents that these are all really learning opportunities to really open up the dialogue of whatever is happening with their child, and to really start a dialogue and an open conversation and really explore their feelings. Because later on, as they get older, they're going to be either, sex is going to come up, drugs are going to come up, and now the digital world is definitely going to come up. And they need a starting place of having and feeling safe with their parents where they can start having those conversations. So that's something that I really want parents to kind of, to look at. But it's also hard too when you get to someone that's 17 and doesn't have that open dialogue with their parents. So how do you recreate that connection? And then some real parenting work has to go in, and we have to look at what's working and what's not working.
I think one of the things that I see a lot is that parents themselves sometimes don't always know what dangers they should be looking out for. I think it's really hard. One of the police officers was saying at an earlier panel that a lot of parents are like, that's not my kid, they wouldn't do that. And I think it's really important that we educate parents really early on that kids have access to almost every type of internet device. Even if you don't let it happen in your home, there's Wi-Fi everywhere. Even if you don't let it happen to your home, they have friends, they go over to their friend's house and their cousin's house and they have access to it. So to really empower parents that even if for you and your values in your home, that's not what you want, to still have those conversations as you two were talking about, where it's like, if you go to so-and-so's house and they have the internet, this is what I'd like you to kind of do and not do. If you're going to be at school and there's internet in the school, or they give you that virtual technology in the school, this is how I would like for you to use it, and to have those conversations, even if in your home or where you are, you don't want that yet, they still have access to it. So I think it's really about telling parents, it's okay that you don't want it yet, that's up to you, but your kids have access to it, so how are you going to have those discussions with them regardless?
I completely agree, and I think it's so interesting that we all really have the same message, which is starting these conversations early. And because of my clinical background in primary care medicine, in the world of pediatrics and family medicine, there's something called anticipatory guidance, which is the part of the visit where you talk about what parents can expect, what the kid can expect coming up. A baby is going to start crawling, it's time to baby proof. Your 9-year-old is going to start developing, what does that look like? So I've been able to see both the people in crisis as well as having that opportunity to have those preventive conversations. And I have to say that absolutely, when I see patients where the kids and the parents have an open line of honest conversation that's been going on for years, and then when those kids get into trouble, and all kids will at some point, make mistakes, they can come in together as a team, and the outcome is always better, at least you get there faster. So my message really, and the reason I started this other business, was to help parents get comfortable with these conversations at a much earlier age, because it's so much easier to talk about this stuff when your child is 6 years old and really interested than when they're 17 and, or on prom night.
I think what we're all saying, and one of the mottos that I had when I worked at a school, was being proactive, not reactive. Don't have a conversation in an assembly about being a digital citizen when a kid fails to become one because we haven't talked about it. And don't have a conversation with your kid when they've already made mistakes. Be proactive. Talk about it from the time that they are introduced to anything that's social media or digitally. I think that's always important, because you want to set them up for success, not for failure.
I love what you guys are saying here. I particularly like the idea of using some of these, for lack of a better word, failures as opportunities, and explaining that to the parents as well, is that all kids are going to test the waters. They kind of have to in order to grow up and develop their frontal lobes and whatnot. But I love the idea what you said, Jason, about it being using it as a positive spin to kind of educate not just the kids, but also the parents, and moving forward from there. And I also love this proactive versus reactive, that however many times even I can hear my own parents, and I'm sure we can all remember our own parents saying things like, when I was your age, and if you do this, then this is going to happen, and yeah, whatever, mom and dad, and then it does happen. So, but at least it's in that nagging back of your head, like, oh, they told me this would happen. So, really, really good stuff. So, as therapists, social workers, and physicians working with parents and youth, what have you found to be the most challenging topics of conversation involving technology, the internet, and of course, then the ever-present youth culture? Go ahead, Mercedes.
I'll go.
Oh, okay.
Well, for me in my business, it's really this conversation about sex and bodies. Parents have such a hard time, which is completely understandable because for many parents, their parents did a terrible job talking about this. But we live in this time where parents really want to do a great job, and they're so thoughtful in their parenting. And so I think we have a wonderful opportunity, as therapists and physicians and educators and parents to just, take this opportunity. You can actually turn this digital dialogue, this conversation, into an entry point into having all these other conversations because they're really so interconnected.
And yeah, I feel like I was going to actually say that one too, but I think what I'm getting a lot of questions for is how do I keep my kids from the internet more so? And I think, what I tell my parents is that you really can't, unfortunately. Like I said, you can get Wi-Fi anywhere. I was working with a kid a few months ago where mom had taken everything that was connected to Wi-Fi out of the home, and he had a Nintendo DS, and they realized you can get on Wi-Fi with a Nintendo DS. He figured that out. So it's like, kids are very intelligent, and you can't keep them away from it. But I think one of the hardest parts for parents, and this is why I love conferences like this, is that they have to get the knowledge too. A lot of us did not grow up with technology. I'm 31, and still the technology kids have now was not what I had when I was in high school. That internet is so different now. So I think giving parents the knowledge early on, talking to them early on about it, and saying, these are the things, I like the word anticipatory, what you just said earlier. Like giving parents knowledge that once your kids get to this age, they're going to want to be a part of it. When they're 3 and 4, they want to play video games, and they want to play, Minecraft. And when they get older, they're going to go over to YouTube. They're going to Google sex stuff. They're going to Google drug stuff. They're going to Google it to figure out what it is. Not because they're doing that behavior yet, but they want to know, what is this? And my friend's doing it, and what is that? So I think, like I said, the challenge for what I hear from most parents is how do I keep my kids away from it? And I like to teach them, don't try to keep them away from it. You want to get in front of it so you can be part of it and walk with them alongside as they're learning about it.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that really quick. I'm glad you brought up the education piece, because one thing that we see, it's with the digital landscape, it's with drugs, it's with the sex stuff. Parents think, well, I haven't had this conversation with my kids yet, but the kids are learning about it, right? The kids know more about their parents do than with all that stuff, right? So as parents, you're not getting educated, and as parents, you're not going out and doing your best to learn about all that stuff. You're going to be left in the dust when those difficult conversations do come up. And one way that I think works really well for having those conversations is you find opportunities where you can have an uncomfortable conversation that's not uncomfortable. For example, if there's an advertisement, you guys are watching the Super Bowl together, right? An advertisement comes on TV about a social media channel, and the same logic can be applied to drinking, to drugs, all of those difficult conversations. But you use that as an opportunity to bring that topic up with your kid, right? So hey, we just saw an advertisement for so and so. What have you experienced that yet? And you use it in a non-confrontational way, so it's really a dialogue. But you start breaking that barrier of uncomfortability, talking about those topics. And so the kids, they become more desensitized to talking with you about it. They're more open, and you slowly work your way into it like that. If you're doing that from an early age, then it's not weird at all. The kids they're very open to, they're very used to having those conversations with you.
I love that. That's really, really great. Sorry, Jason, did you want to go on?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Having those conversations is it's so important, and I think another on the line of sex is the sharing of pics and how what the consequences of that could be. And when I'm talking to a client, I'm really there. I'm like thinking in my mind, do not do this. But I don't want to be the one to say that, because that may drive them to rebel. But really, kind of guiding them in a place of like, what are the consequences? What could really happen? And once they get to a place where they see what the what the consequences could be. I also mentioned that, what you're doing is also illegal. You're sharing child pornography. Your parents are the ones that are paying for this phone line, and these are the consequences that can kind of come with that also, so.
Well, again, some really great stuff here. I love, again, the idea of starting to have some of these difficult conversations in a non-difficult or stressful environment. I think making it a little easier and not like this grand all-be-all conversation at a certain age, like, okay, this is the date, I have to have this conversation. Making it more comfortable, and I know Dolly and I were talking earlier as well about sharing, parents being a bit vulnerable as well, and sharing conversations in that casual environment, and showing their own vulnerability that they had to learn from too. I think these are all really, really great ideas to have those difficult conversations, or to make them less difficult and more just a part of growing up and parenting. I also really liked the idea of using digital conversation as a catalyst to start different conversations. So if you start, if you're using the digital space to talk about, understanding how social media works and whatnot, and then sort of incorporating other bits and bobs about those difficult conversations when you're talking about the digital sphere, again, it just makes it that much easier for everybody involved too. Excellent. So, how can parents have what many consider to be a difficult conversation when they know that they know so little about, say, the digital space? I mean, obviously they know about the difficult stuff, but maybe not all of it, obviously. But how would you recommend to parents to start having these conversations when they may not know everything about the digital world?
Well, I think it's, what you have in your home is an expert in the digital world. So if you aren't familiar with what's happening, you could play dumb and just kind of ask your child, what is Instagram? Can you help me set up a profile? I heard about this thing, can you help me with this? And let them be the teacher, and this way you're sharing in the experience. You can give them an old camera and they can start taking photos, and you can upload that together and maybe create something online, such as, some type of book or something like that. But engaging them and asking them to kind of teach you, I think, is a great way to learn. Also, you can just, do some Google searching of what are the top sites and put your child's age in there, and there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be pulled up.
And I'll piggyback on that. One of the things that I think is really important for parents to realize is that you aren't going to know everything. Even if this wasn't the digital world, I think about my parents, and they didn't know about certain things that I was doing just because it was new then. And I think one of the things that parents sometimes, again, going back to my in-parent shaming thing, is that they feel like they have to stay in their house and figure it out all by themselves, and you don't. Like, I look up here at this panel of people, you have physicians, you have therapists, you have school counselors, you have people that are really aware of this stuff, and you might even have other, cousins, nieces, aunts, and uncles who know this stuff too. So you could even say, maybe you don't want to ask your kid because you don't want them to know that you don't know things. So you might say, hey, doctor, my kid is on this, I don't know what this is. Or, hey, school counselor, can you talk to me about what this is? So I always tell parents, get support when it comes to the sex talk. If you don't know how to talk about it, that's what other people are for. When it comes to the drug talk, if you're really scared about these things, talk to someone who has the right terminology and can give you that. So don't feel like you have to be in your home by yourself figuring it out. You can definitely go out and ask people in your community and around you too, what does this mean for me and my family, and see if they can give you some more insight into it.
I agree. One thing I was thinking about your question was that parents have so much anxiety over this topic, and because they feel like they're not up to speed and their kids are, but what they forget is that they have all these years of experience and wisdom in the real life. And part of being a good digital citizen is just being a good citizen in the real world. And this is all really common sense, and these conversations are opportunities for parents to share their family values. And if you don't have the conversations, you're missing out on that opportunity. And then again, it's such an amazing, fun way to engage with kids if you can sort of find out what they're interested in and partake with them. It can really build a bond.
And I'm thinking about what Jason said too, like this kind of rocks parents' world. When I say this, they ask a question and I just say, well, why don't you ask them? Like these kids and teens are so smart and they know so much, and what better way to gauge how they value what they see, what values they have with social media and in the digital world? Just ask them. I think they would be very excited to share. I mean, as a school counselor, if I said, kind of played dumb and was like, explain to me Minecraft, I mean, their faces light up like, wow, I can't believe you're asking, but it's also got to be authentic.
Yeah.
You can't pretend you know something and walk in there, they're gonna look at you like you're crazy. But if you genuinely don't know something, they will be so happy to teach, and they love teaching their parents, and they love teaching their educators, especially about the things that they don't know yet. So when in doubt, just ask.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, Dolly, that you brought up the citizenship stuff, because the reality that I see is that the digital world is not this like new novel separate from the rest of your character, and it ultimately comes down to that as character, right? So if kids are being brought up with a certain concept of citizenship and character, then that's going to make it a lot more easy for them to bring that into the digital landscape. And if that character is missing on the back end, then of course it's not going to transfer over to their behavior in the digital world. And then, like Jason said, Google is such a powerful tool. If you're a parent that doesn't know how to use or what Instagram is, goes and Googles a guide to using Instagram for a first timer, they will learn everything they need to know right then and there. So.
I think it takes a village. The old adage still works today. It takes a village to raise a child. Absolutely. Okay, well, here's a great one. Actually, more self-serving than anything else. For those of us working behind the scenes, day to day, moderating content that we see, and I'm safe to say that we see a lot of particularly interesting, provocative, and dangerous content from time to time when these kids are finding a space online where they consider it to be safe and private. And we're the ones that are reporting it if it becomes too dangerous, so to speak. Do you have any advice to us on what you think would be the best way for us to report these things? Do we consider this to be private and keep it as such? Or is it really something that, other than, of course, illegal, anything that we report that's illegal, but really, we see a lot of stuff and we get a lot of complaints, not just from children, but also from parents that we're invading their privacy. And yet we're also seeing really interesting conversations, very intense sex chat, very intense self-harm in various ways, anorexia, self-cutting, self-burning, etc. So what advice would you give to us when it comes to seeing these things? How should we report it? How do we deal with it? Since we are not necessarily experts or psychiatrists and marriage and family counselors.
Well, I think the first, no one wants, that's a hard one. I was hoping someone else was going to speak up.
Where's the attorney on the panel?
Yeah, and I want to qualify this by saying, well, I'm speaking really loudly. I want to qualify this by saying that I'm not, I don't feel qualified to speak on the legal ramifications.
No, I'm not thinking about legal.
What I would say is that the priority's always got to be the kid's safety, right? And so I know when working with clients, I know just as a citizen out in the community, the number one, especially when you're talking about minors, right, not adults. So the number one priority's got to be the kid's safety. Is how can we make sure that what we're doing is conducive to letting them have a safe environment, and if there's unsafe behavior taking place inside of that environment, what are we doing about it? Because it's different when the dialogue becomes about adults, right? Then it becomes very much about privacy and rights, but when you're talking about a 13-year-old kid, right, we're charged as society, they're minors for a reason. They aren't supposed to be able to make decisions that are in their best interests all the time, and so as adults, if we are monitoring a forum where that they're participating in, I believe on a personal level that we do have a responsibility to do everything that we can to keep them safe. If that means reporting, if that means discussing, if that means bringing it to their families, they're not adults again, right? Kids, 13-year-olds their brains aren't even close to fully developed yet. So.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say too, something that I think about when I think about our current climate of violence and stuff like that is that we also should empower our kids how to report too. So I think if I see a friend who has confided in me that they are having a hard time, they don't want to tell their parents, they don't want to tell anybody, what do I do when I'm 13 or 14 and my friend keeps texting me how she hates herself and she wants to die? Like, I need to know and feel empowered as a friend to help my friend. So I think also along with having these dialogues is talking to our kids and saying, it's not you, okay, but if it's your friend or if it's someone else, and if you're playing Minecraft or if you're playing Xbox Live and one of your friends says, hey, I'm going to do this in real life, what do you do and how do we help our kids? Because sometimes we don't get to see it as the adults. Our kids are playing, our kids are on there, but they see it, you know? And so I think, again, the idea is empowering our kids to know when to report and how to report as well. That might be good.
Yeah, I think that goes back again to that trust level as well, is developing that trust where parents can also stay vulnerable or show their vulnerable side to the kids, which then when the kids really need them, they know that they have a safe space to go to the parents or some other trusted adult to share that kind of information. I know I also say all the time when I'm talking to parents that no site, no game, no online product is worth yours or your child's time or precious money if they are not going to be very visible with how they're going to protect you and your child. And whether that's in easy to find privacy settings, easy to find chat settings, how to report, and easy to use report tools as well. So excellent. Sorry to cut all of you guys off, but just wanted to get that done. Yeah. Jason, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, going back to Howard's point, I really think when you give someone a cell phone, it's not a right just because we're born to get a cell phone, but it's a privilege, and especially when you're giving it to a tween or a teen. And in that conversation, there needs to be really clear expectations, and one of them is about safety and how I may have to break some your privacy if your safety is in jeopardy.
And being comfortable saying that. I think sometimes parents feel scared to do that. They feel, I gave us a phone already. It's like, but it's yours and you pay for it every month. So like, don't be scared to say, hey, you're not being safe. I found this out, so I'm going to have to take it from you for a minute while we discuss your safety. Like, I think empowering parents to feel like you can do that. You're not a bad parent, and your kid might hate you. They're going to say, I hate you, and you suck, of course, because you're taking away something that's really valuable to them. But I think taking it away and having the discussion, not just taking it away and putting it in the drawer for 5 days, but taking it away and saying, this is why we're doing this. You were being unsafe, or you were making someone else feel unsafe. So we have to have this discussion now.
Yeah, and it's okay to change the plan. If the plan was you're going to have access whenever you want and that's not working, it's okay as a parent to step in and say, have that conversation. And also before handing over the devices in the first place, to let them know this is kind of a probation period. And here you go, I'm going to be monitoring and watching, and then if things aren't working out well for you or me, let's talk about it, and then we can make adjustments as needed.
Yeah, Jason, again, I like what you were saying there. A phone, a game, whatever. This video machine is not a right. It's a privilege, and we'll treat it as such. And that's can also have to start those other difficult conversations as well. That's a great idea. I know there was an earlier panel or a workshop breakout session about having a digital contract with your kids, which I actually think would be great. Again, circling back to what you were saying, Dolly, it's not necessarily just a digital contract, but it should also just be a citizenship and behavior contract, which of course grows and changes as the child grows and changes too, and the parents, has the right to change their mind. That's why they're the parent. So I love that. Excellent. Anything else to add to that one, Casey? Okay.
Yeah, I just really quick, just piggybacking off of Jason, it's if that conversation, when you hand that phone over, you make it it doesn't have to be in a confrontational or a mean way, but very clearly, look, I'm giving you this phone, it's a privilege. I own this phone, I pay the bill on this phone. You set that expectation up and you let them know, hey, I'm going to be checking the text messages, I'm going to be looking at your history, this is my phone that I'm letting you use. You set that up in the beginning, then it's not a breach of trust when you do have to go in and look at their text messages. You say, you knew this from the gate, you knew this as soon as you got it. And it takes away that element of, well, you're infringing on my privacy. What do you mean? This is the agreement from the start.
And also adding, if things are wiped, the cookies are wiped, the text messages are wiped, then we're going to have a conversation about what's happening, because that should be a red flag.
Yeah.
And I'll also add to that even if the phone is wiped or they wipe their account, those of us working behind the scenes still have server access, so it's never completely gone from the internet, just FYI. So
And I want to kind of piggyback on that too, because I think sometimes kids feel like, oh, I deleted it. So even when they get in trouble, so they'll send a picture to somebody, or they'll send a text and they'll delete it, or they'll go on Facebook or Snapchat and try to delete the things they did. And the police officers at the earlier panel were talking about, hey, we can still get to it. If an investigation comes up that you were cyberbullying or that you were doing things, we can still get to it. So the kid might think, haha, I deleted it, I can't get in trouble. But if it becomes an investigation, people can still get to it. So I think that's a discussion to have with their kids, where if they wiped it before you give it back to me, okay, but if something happens, I can't help you because you wiped it and other people have it. So like, what are we going to be able to do there,
Yeah.
Well, I just have one question left for you guys, then we'll open it up to the audience. I wanted to end on a happy note. Can you guys give me any success stories that you've had in your profession? Excellent, Casey, go ahead.
In one of my parenting groups, we were talking about social media and digital and having fun, like having fun with your kids, like enjoying this really powerful tool. And they looked at me like I was crazy, like how am I gonna have fun doing this? None of it makes any sense. And I said, act interested in something that they're doing. That's your homework, go home. The parent came back the next week and said that she noticed her son was watching YouTube videos. And she said, pick the funniest one that you've seen. And for the first time in a long time, he looked at her like, oh, okay, and he showed her, she loved it. And ever since then, and this was last year and even now, every night they share something new they found on YouTube. And she said for the first time, her 14-year-old son and her had a connection that they weren't talking before. I mean, she couldn't get on the level. And I said, it doesn't have to be something that you're not interested in, but YouTube is like a good one because you can find things as an adult that you like, but they can, so they often switch and their relationship was improved immediately after that.
It's wonderful. I have one.
Yep.
I get a lot of calls from parents whose kids, young kids, 8, 9, 10, have stumbled into the world of pornography, usually unintentionally at first, and then sometimes it becomes a little bit more of a habit. But they come because they're terrified that their child has been exposed, and we haven't even talked about puberty at home or sex, and now they can't unsee what they've seen. And so sort of, working together with them as to, how to handle this situation and also how to now start having those conversations that you really do need to have. I mean, my opinion is if you are handing the phone over to your child without any filters and no monitoring, I mean, if you haven't talked about sex, this is where they're just going to go whether they're trying to or not. Anyway, but what happens is they start having these conversations, and it shows the child that they're willing to engage in conversation about these kind of touchy subjects. And then, and I get the feedback that not only have they successfully talked about that, but it's opened the door to all kinds of other communication that's rewarding.
Yeah, there was a client where he was a teenager and he didn't really communicate with a lot of his family for a good bit of time during some problems going on. So he actually got into some work and started turning his life around. And actually one of the ways he connected with his grandmother is that he taught her how to use Instagram. And so even though she lived a long way away, they would kind of jointly manage and create this Instagram account, and it was a way for her to be involved and a way for him to be of service to her. And now they'll kind of run it together and post pictures, and it's a really cool way of communication.
That's so sweet. There's a great film that FOSI, I don't know if any of you guys know about FOSI, the Family Online Safety Institute. They work very heavily in DC with the government. In fact, their annual conferences first begin in December. It's one of the most interesting conferences. I highly recommend it if anybody can go to attend, but I digress. They had a great film that they presented last year, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, but it was about, it was a school assignment where a group of teenagers were teaching senior citizens how to use social media, and in particular they all had they created a YouTube page together, and it was so fascinating. And what the teenagers learned about what the senior citizens found to be important. One of the senior citizens was so excited to show how she made a grilled cheese sandwich with her iron every day. That was her lunch, and she thought that would be fascinating on YouTube. And so, but it was a really charming, endearing film to just see how to connect the two generations together. Anyway, it sounds very similar to your story, Howard. Anyone else with a nice happy ending story?
Yeah, I think with my kids, a lot of my kids are onto Minecraft and things like that, and sometimes the parents are like, I don't care about that. And so I did kind of the same thing that you had done, where it was like, just let your kid show you what they do on there. Just let your kid show you. And so with this one kid, he actually began to talk to his mom about his feelings through building Minecraft, because he couldn't do it before. And so he would say, you know what it feels like? It feels like when there's this thing here, you have to break it and break it and break it. That's how my anger feels. And I was like, wow, he literally just said it on his own. It was one of the first times that mom was like, oh, he told me how he felt. So again, when we try to shut things down, I guess with their kids, like, you know, we miss them. But when she said, okay, tell me about this Minecraft thing, he was able to kind of tell her about how his feelings felt as he's building stuff. So that was fun to see in a session.
Very powerful.
Excellent.
One success story for me, which seems like a small victory to me, was just one of my clients was always on his phone during the session, and through just conversation and just talking about how the person across from him would feel, he is now at a place where he isn't looking at his phone during the session.
See, that's baby steps are the best
Yeah.
steps. Yeah.
50 minutes of no technology.
Yeah, win! Excellent. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for being up here. I want to open it up now to the audience. If anyone has any burning questions. Yes?
I could probably shout.
But I'm going to run over here in a bit.
Some child psychologists I've read have said this, helicopter parenting and stuff is really, now they're seeing big problems with it, with kids that just go to college and have panic attacks because they don't know how to do the laundry or whatever. And then so I'm reading also that some of the child psychologists are saying, listen, when they get, in the mid-teens or something, you need to give more and more freedom. And one told me, yes, let them have Snapchat. And yes, don't monitor every single, all their conversations too much, and let them get in trouble a little bit. They're gonna have to make those decisions in a couple years anyway. So what are your thoughts about that? You got the safety versus, giving them freedom and let them become adult and make good decisions?
So one thing that I'll say about that is that I think we've all talked about it. It's about discussion. So yeah, I think you do give your kids more freedom as they get older, but you have that discussion. You say, so you're 16 now, you want to stay out longer, fine, let's try it for a while and see how you do. If after 3 weeks your kid comes home one time and they do with it, okay, cool, you're doing it. If after 3 weeks your kid has been coming home 2 hours, 3 hours late, turning off the phone, letting the phone die, and never answering, then obviously that's not something they're ready for. So I think it really becomes about this discussion about if your kid wants something, especially as they get older. I think that's really for kids who are about to launch, right? They're 15, 16, they're going towards that. You definitely want to start having discussions because your kids are definitely going to want to do that. They're going to want to be on everything. They're going to want to be a part of everything, and developmentally they're supposed to because they're trying to figure out their identity. They're trying to figure out who they are. But when they come to you with these things, you can say, let's talk about it. Let's look at it. Let's set some parameters so you're safe. Because at home with you, I'm not even going to worry about being helicopter or free range or any of that because those are labels that are really arbitrary. But at home with you, they have a really safe space to try these things and make mistakes, but you still want to give them some parameters. So I'll let you stay out to 11 if you're 16, 17 years old. But if after like a month, like I said, you've been staying out until 1 and 2 and let your phone die and not answering when we call you, maybe you're not ready for that curfew yet. Maybe we need to pull back and see what's going on there. So that's my spiel, so to speak.
I have 2 things on this. One is, maybe you've read it, but there's a great book out written by Julie Lincott Haynes called How to Raise an Adult, and she's the former dean of freshmen at Stanford University, and she talks about what has happened to this generation of kids that was raised by really controlling helicopter parents who continue their control while the kids are in college, telling them what classes they need to take so that they go down the right path to get to the right grad school. And now the kids are at the job fairs and the parents are there with them, and now they got the job and the parents are calling the boss to negotiate salaries. And what does this mean, right, for these? So that's sort of my side note. So it's a great book if you're interested in that topic. And I think that it has so much to do with the trust between the parent and the child. How is this child? Again, it comes back to real life. Really, everything we're talking about in the digital world really comes back to the real world. And so are they dependable in real life? Are they responsible? Are they getting their homework done? Are they communicating well with you at home? Or do they seem to have friends who are positive and doing important, interesting things? And if that's the case, then I think you let out the leash a little. And I think with this, my perspective is when you're introducing these devices to younger kids is that there needs to be a lot of monitoring, but also mentoring around this, and that's where all these conversations come into play. And then as they get older, you let out the leash and you let them have a little bit more independence. And yes, we want them to mess up when they're in elementary school and middle school and high school because the stakes are low, right? And so we don't want them to have their first opportunity to mess up when they're in college or out living on their own. So I feel very strongly about helping kids gain independence, and part of that is for us as parents and educators to talk about our own failures, not just where we succeeded, but how have we messed up both online and in the real world, and so that they realize that that's okay. So then letting them know, I expect that you're going to make some mistakes. I hope you don't, but if you do, come to me. I've got your back. I'm your parent.
Yeah, I see kids that are literally crippled by their parents over, and I hesitate to say it so dramatically, but they're crippled by their parents' over involvement in their lives, and it's like they haven't had the ability to make any mistakes. That doesn't mean that you give them free rein to go run around though without any boundaries, and I think that's what it is. It's a balance between having boundaries that are established and set up in rules, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that, you know, when you're at your first job and you forgot your lunch, that your mom's driving over there to bring it to you. I'm serious. Like that's like a low. That's not even a crazy one. And yeah. So it's really about having that balance. The other thing is that the social media stuff, and even taking a step further, going off to college, the jobs, not raising these kids as helicopter parents. It's got to be part of a holistic approach, right? Where we're working on kids' character. When we're treating it like that and trying to raise good people and working on helping these kids be people with integrity, people that are giving back to the world around them, people that are contributing to the world around them, and they're not just taking. A lot of this stuff we see, it's a lot easier for them to navigate, and we see a lot of success with that, especially working in the recovery world, and not just kids that have a lot of problems, but also just when kids are focused on giving and you know, community service and healthy activities and having integrity, they're more successful, you know, they're happier.
I think too, I always tell parents, because I can see the insecurity and that fear, that you know your kid's best. Yes. Not every child is the same. What my kid can handle on social media isn't what your kid can handle on social media, and that individuation and that autonomy is a process. It's not you're free, you're in high school, you're free, but you have to know your kids. You have to know, like, what are they ready for? What are they capable of? And you give them little by little, and you build the trust, like you were saying. And then before you know it, they've learned the life skills to handle situations when they come up. But I hate, you know, when parents say, but you're the expert. It's like, I am, but you're the expert on your kid, not me. I can tell you strategies and tools, but you have to know your kids and trust your instincts, because you have been with them since the beginning of time, and usually there's a little bit of relief there, like, okay, I'm not doing so bad. No, you're fine.
Yeah, you know, one thing that came up for me was, you know, with the helicopter parents, or if we're using that term, they really lose their sense of self. So I think as a parent, it's our job to create these independent thinkers. So when they go into the real world, they know what's right and what's wrong. And that really can start with mindfulness and just being in touch with what they're feeling and what's happening inside of them. And knowing what they're feeling and knowing that their feelings are valid, and giving them, as a parent, a place where they can express those feelings, so they can start to develop and know that, like, you know, this is kind of a dangerous situation right now, and I'm a little bit scared, and I know the difference between just being anxious and being really scared, and I need to go ahead and talk to someone about this.
What about the idea also of kind of reminding adults that they were once teenagers and that they didn't necessarily, I mean, obviously, when many of us were growing up, the technology wasn't there, but the technology is so visual that I think that can make it much more scary and compelling, because, you know, when we were teenagers and we were talking about sex with our friends, or talking about kind of, you know, rebellious conversations, or doing our rebellious stage, we weren't necessarily posting it on social media, right? We were talking about it with our friends, but we were that age once too. And so for some of these helicopter parents, maybe reminding them that when they were teenagers, they wanted their privacy to kind of stumble and fall, and that, hey, they turned out okay. It's okay, you know, to kind of learn at that age, and not have, when parents don't have to know everything that they're doing 24/7, 365.
Nor should they. I think that's a really important point, is that we, you know, when we were teenagers, it was a totally different time. And so parents now have this window into adolescence that never existed before, right? So when we were teenagers hanging out at the park or the mall, having these conversations, using language maybe we shouldn't have, you know, doing who knows what, parents weren't able to see it. And now, not only do they see it, but sometimes they're seeing it out of context. Maybe they're seeing it weeks later. The whole issue has calmed down and been resolved between the kids, and now the parents turn it into this new big thing. And I've definitely seen cases where the parents become much more of a problem than whatever bad activity that they were worried about. So I think we have to, as parents and educators, show a little restraint, and if we see something that concerns us, stay calm. Invite the child to have a discussion about it. What was going on at that time? What led to this post? Just try to understand the context around it. Really good point.
And I think, I'll say this too, I think the idea too is that parents are also amplifier too of things. So I think the reason why we have so many more helicopter parents is because just like parents have access to kids, people have way more access to parents to tell them what to do and tell them how to do it and tell them how they're supposed to. So I see a lot of parents who become helicopter parents because they're so anxious that they're going to get in trouble by the school, the police, and everybody else when their kid messes up. So they're trying to stop their kid from messing up, thinking, unfortunately, that they're going to be able to do that. So I think we also have to realize that our culture, just like for our kids is shifted, it's also shifted for our parents. Our parents were able to parent in a different way than parents are now. Parents are under kind of a microscope now, and every time their kids do something that's not great, you suck, you're a bad parent. Oh, why did you choose that? We do this parenting now, I'm an attachment, I'm at this. It's like there's so many ways that parents are trying to fit into what's right that they end up sometimes becoming helicopter parents so they can be the right type of parent, not because they're trying to stifle their kids' development, but because they're trying to be the right parent. When they show up to PTA, they look good, things like that, so.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody wants to ask it. Go ahead.
I'll ask a quick version. I've actually already heard a lot of great answers to this, but I'll ask anyway. I'm a parent, but I'm also an educator who's working with parents, and I'd like for your advice on working with a specific type of parent, one that is stuck in kind of a reactive place, one that has a good feeling for ethics and healthy behavior offline, and maybe hasn't yet figured out how that maps over to these new situations. And like I said, it's already come up, and if there's just one something you haven't heard addressed in that area, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I speak from the parent training piece of it? I think the idea is having empathy for that parent and understanding that they probably don't know what's going on, or they don't understand that translation just because they've never had to deal with it. And I think you brought up something that's really brilliant, which is they know what's going on offline. They have those ethics. So just encourage them that what's right or wrong. It's the same thing works online as well, and to encourage them and say that whatever you think is right, whatever you think is wrong, those morals that you've had offline for all these years, they still apply, like you said, they still apply online. So I think really when you're dealing with parents that are difficult or have a lot of defenses up or just are really kind of, I'm going to do it this way because this is the way it is, to really have empathy for why they're so hell-bent on having their parent to go this way and try to figure that out. Because what I found out is those reactive parents were they're using their defense mechanism the same way we all do. I don't want to get in trouble, I don't want my kid to get in trouble, and I don't want to be called a bad parent. So if I do it this way, it's going to work. So we have to have that empathy for them and say, hey, I know this is hard, I know that this is a really tough time, but can we look at it another way? Can we bring your knowledge that you've always had to this current situation and just really empower them? That's kind of the best way that I've found that works with parents who are really reactive and really set in their ways of how they want things to look.
Yeah, just to piggyback, and you said it, but I just want to kind of really point out is go to the feeling, kind of see, there's a lot of anxiety there's a lot of controlling, but there's some fear underneath that. There's a parent that's scared there. So if you can validate that feeling and just kind of reflect that back, their anxiety may lower a little bit, and you may have the opportunity they may open up a little bit and give you that opportunity to talk a little bit more and go a little bit deeper.
I talk to parents a lot about fear and anxiety and parenting and this pressure that parents feel today, and how that's very real and very natural, but to be in touch with that and understand that parenting from a point of anxiety and fear is really a horrible way to parent. And so, if they can kind of come to terms with that and really look at, is this working? Is that reactivity impacting this relationship with my child in a positive way, or are things going a little bit sideways and maybe I need to make some adjustments there and be a little bit more positive about the parenting?
Casey, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to say the exact same thing. I think the reaction comes from a place of insecurity and wanting what's best, and with all of the pressure and culture on things that they don't understand. So I oftentimes will just take it off of the child and just say, God, this seems to be really overwhelming for you. Or this you must like really be concerned about. And then generally what we find, doing therapy with that kind of work is just them to slow down. We just want to slow them down. That's always my goal with parents. Let's take one step back and look at it from a different lens. Usually that brings the reaction down, and then you can really do the work or have the conversation that you want to have.
And also that it's okay to apologize to your child. If you got it wrong and you don't feel good about the way the conversation went, it's okay to circle back the next day or the next week and say, I was just thinking about that conversation. I don't like the way it went. I don't like, the way I responded. Let's talk about it some more.
Yeah, no, I literally have nothing to add. They covered everything. Great answers.
Well, I think that just brings us just about to the end of our panel. You guys have been amazing and fantastic, and I've learned lots. I hope you guys did as well. I want to thank you all for hanging out late when I know it's 1 o'clock out there. I think most of them will be around to speak to afterwards. I would also encourage all of you, if you've gotten anything out of this, to go to your PTAs as well. You guys are the ones that are doing the work here to learn so much, and if you can share that with your communities and your other parents and other teachers and PTAs, I think that would be fantastic. These ladies and gentlemen work really, really hard. They have a lot of great information to share. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.